Suggestions for teaching. Using a constructivist approach to meaningful learning. Arrange the learning situation so that students are exposed to different perspectives on a problem or an issue. This is the crux of the discovery approach and the constructivist view of learning. The basic idea is to arrange the elements of a learning task and guide students' actions so that students discover or construct a personally meaningful conception of a problem or issue, as opposed to someone else's conception. In some cases, you may present a topic that is a matter of opinion or that all students are sure to know something about. In other cases, you might structure the discussion by exposing all participants to the same background information. Ask students to discuss familiar topics or those that are matters of opinion. Examples. What are some of the techniques that advertising agencies use in television commercials to persuade us to buy certain products? What do you think is the best book you have ever read, and why do you think so? Provide necessary background information by asking all students to read all or part of a book, take notes on a lecture, view a film, conduct library research, or conduct research on the internet. Examples. After the class has read Great Expectations, ask, what do you think Dickens was trying to convey when he wrote this novel? Was he just trying to tell a good story? Or was he also trying to get us to think about certain kinds of relationships between people? After I explain some of the principles of electrical currents, I'm going to ask you to suggest rules for connecting batteries in series and in parallel. Then we'll see how well your rules work. Structure discussions by posing a specific question, presenting a provocative topic-related issue, or asking students to choose topics or subtopics. It is important to structure a discovery session by giving students something reasonably specific to discuss. Otherwise, they may simply engage in a disorganized and desultory bull session. You might supply direction in the following ways. In some cases, encourage students to arrive at conclusions already reached by others. Thousands of books provide detailed answers to such questions as what is human about human beings? How did they get that way? How can they be made more so? But constructivists believe that answers mean more when they are constructed by the individual, not supplied ready-made by others. As you look over lesson plans, therefore, you might try to put together some questions for students to answer by engaging in discussion rather than by reading or listening to what others have already discovered. In searching for such topics, you might take into account the techniques that Bruner described. Here's a list of those techniques together with an example of each one. Keep in mind that students often acquire a deeper understanding of ideas and issues when they have had appropriate previous experience. Emphasize contrast. In an elementary school social studies unit on cultural diversity, say, when you watch this film on Mexico, look for customs and ways of living that differ from ours. Then we'll talk about what these differences are and why they may have developed. Stimulate informed guessing. In a middle school unit on natural science, you might say, suppose we wanted to figure out some kind of system to classify trees so that we could later find information about particular types. What would be the best way to do it? After students have developed a classroom scheme, show them schemes that specialists have developed. Encourage participation. In a high school political science class, illustrate the jury system by staging a mock trial. Note that the use of a simulation satisfies the constructivist criterion of realistic tasks and contexts. Stimulate awareness. In a high school English class, ask the students to discuss how the author developed the plot. In other cases, present a controversial topic for which there is no single answer. Discussions might center on provocative issues about which there are differences of opinion. One caution here is to avoid topics such as premarital sex or legalized abortion that parents may not want discussed in school, either because they are convinced it is their prerogative to discuss them with their children, because it is, or because they feel that students may be pressured to endorse your opinion because you assign grades. You should not avoid controversy, but neither should you go out of your way to agitate students and their parents. Another caution is to avoid selecting issues that provoke more than they instruct. You may be tempted to present a highly controversial topic and then congratulate yourself at the end of the period if most students engaged in heated discussion, but if they simply argued enthusiastically about something that had nothing to do with the subject you are assigned to teach, you cannot honestly claim to have arranged an instructive exchange of ideas. Examples. In a middle school science class, ask students to list arguments for and against attempting to alter the genetic code of human beings. In a high school political science class, ask students to list arguments for and against democratic forms of government. If time is limited, and if only one topic is to be covered, ask students to form a circle and have an all-class discussion. You may sometimes wish to have the entire class discuss a topic. Such discussions are most likely to be successful if all students have eye contact with one another. The simplest way to achieve this is to have students sit in a circle. Next, invite responses to the question you have posed. As students make remarks, serve more as a moderator than as a teacher. Try to keep the discussion on the topic, but avoid directing it toward a specific predetermined end result. If one or more students tend to dominate the discussion, say something like, "Kim and Carlos have given us their ideas. Now I'd like to hear from the rest of you." If an aggressive student attacks or belittles something that a classmate says, respond with something like, "It's good to believe in a point of view, but let's be friendly as we listen to other opinions. This is supposed to be a discussion, not an argument or a debate." Factors that lead to successful or unsuccessful discussions are often idiosyncratic, but there are certain procedures you might follow to increase the likelihood of success. Ask questions that stimulate students to apply, analyze, synthesize, and evaluate. When you first structure a discussion session, but also while it is underway, take care to ask questions likely to elicit different points of view. If you ask students to supply information, for example, when did Charles Dickens write Great Expectations, the first correct response will lead to closure. You may end up asking a series of questions leading to brief answers, the equivalent of a fill-in exam. When you seek to encourage students to construct personally meaningful interpretations of the issues or to develop skills as deductive thinkers, it is preferable to ask questions that are likely to tap higher levels of thinking. You just learned how to calculate the area of a circle. Think of as many different ways you can use that bit of information if you were a do-it-yourself homeowner. Last month we read a novel by Dickens. This month we read a play by Shakespeare. What are some similarities in the way each author developed the plot of his story? Synthesis. Allow sufficient time for initial responses and then probe for further information, if appropriate. Recent research has found that many teachers fail to allow enough time for students to respond to questions. Quite often, instructors wait only 1 second before repeating the question, calling on another student, or answering the question themselves. When teachers wait at least 3 seconds after asking a question, students are more likely to participate. Their responses increase in frequency, length, and complexity, and their achievement improves. There are changes in teacher behavior as well. As a function of waiting longer, teachers ask more complex questions and have higher expectations for the quality of students' responses. One possible explanation for improved student recitation when teachers wait longer for a response is that reflective thinkers have an opportunity to figure out what they want to say. But even impulsive thinkers probably welcome a few more seconds of thinking time. It seems logical to expect that snap answers will be more superficial than answers supplied after even a few seconds of reflection. In addition to giving students ample time to make an initial response, you should encourage them to pursue an idea. If it seems appropriate, probe for further information or clarification of a point by asking students who give brief or incomplete answers to explain how or why they arrived at a conclusion or to supply additional comments. Example, well, Keisha, I'm sure a gardener might sometimes need to find the area of a circle, but can you give a more specific example? If you can't think of one right away, put up your hand as soon as you can describe a specific situation in which it would help to know the area of a circular patch of lawn or soil. While selecting students to speak in class, use techniques likely to sustain steady but non-threatening attention. At the same time, guard against the temptation to call primarily on bright, articulate, assertive students. The way you moderate student contributions may not only determine how successful the discussion will be, but may also influence how students feel about themselves and each other. Jacob Cownan points out that when a teacher first names a student and then asks a question, the rest of the class may turn its attention to other things. The same tendency to tune out may occur if a teacher follows a set pattern of calling on students, for example, by going around a circle. To keep all the students on their toes, you might ask questions first and then, in an unpredictable sequence, call on those who volunteer to speak, frequently switching from one part of the room to another. Guard against the temptation to call primarily on students you expect to give a good or provocative answer. Repeatedly ignoring students who may be a bit inarticulate or unimaginative may cause them and their classmates to conclude that you think they are incompetent. These students may then lose interest in and totally ignore what is taking place. Use guided experiences to satisfy both constructivist principles and state learning standards. Because constructivism is strongly student-centered and emphasizes high-level outcomes, it's sometimes perceived as being incompatible with the needs for teachers to prepare students for high-stakes tests that are based on state learning standards. And it takes too long. But through the use of guided experiences, teachers can do both. The trick is to embed standards in learning experiences that students care about. Jeffrey Kane, Renate Nemela Kane, and Carol McClintock describe how this was done for 8th grade classes studying the U.S. Civil War. To satisfy state learning standards, students needed to learn such things as the nature of slavery, the causes of the war, important dates in the sequence of events, major battles, and significant individuals who affected the course of the war. The first step was to teach students how to listen to one another and express disagreements in a non-judgmental way. An introductory event was then used to spark students' interest in the topic. They were read a story about a woman who who disguised herself as a man, enlisted in the Union Army, and worked as a coal handler on a canal boat. They were then shown a short segment from the motion picture Gettysburg, in which Confederate soldiers marched directly into cannon and rifle fire. The last part of the introduction involved telling students that were more than 400 women. There were more than 400 women disguised themselves as men and participated in the war, and that the 51,000 soldiers who were killed during the 3-day Battle of Gettysburg exceeded the number of U.S. soldiers who were killed during the entire Vietnam War. When invited to raise questions, the students wanted to know such things as why women fought in the war, how it was that nobody knew they were women, why the North and South went to war, and why soldiers would walk into enemy gunfire. The students were assigned to groups based on the similarity of the questions they raised, and were told to seek answers from library resources, the internet, and interviews with war veterans. The teachers used the subsequent reports each group made to the class and the discussions that followed to ensure that such standards-related issues as the different groups involved in the war and the nature of slavery were introduced and discussed. If abundant time is available, and if a controversial or subdivided topic is to be discussed, divide the class into groups of about 5. A major limitation on any kind of discussion is that only one person can talk at a time. You can reduce this difficulty by dividing the class into smaller groups before asking them to exchange ideas. A group of about 5 seems to work best. If only 2 or 3 students are interacting with one another, the exchange of ideas may be limited. If there are more than 5, not all members will be able to contribute at frequent intervals. Think of the McLaughlin Report. Raymond Brown and Peter Renshaw describe an approach to small group classroom discussion based on the following principles derived from Vygotsky's socio-cultural theory of cognitive development. Students should present their ideas with sufficient clarity so that other students can distinguish relevant from irrelevant ideas. Relevant ideas can be rejected by others only if their validity can be questioned on the basis of past experience or logical reasoning. Ideas that contradict one another or that belong to mutually exclusive points of view must be resolved through group argument. All members understand and agree that the group will strive to reach a consensus on an issue by each member actively contributing to arguments that lead to a solution. The group will present its arguments to the other members of the class. Extend and augment classroom discussions with discussion-oriented websites. Because of competing academic standards, and demands, classroom discussions must be limited both in number and length. But by using such websites as Collaborai's Classroom, those discussions can be extended and new discussions can be started. The topic library page contains lessons contributed by other teachers on such topics as English and language arts, history and social studies, math, science and technology, health and life skills, and the visual and performing arts. Teachers can create various discussion groups based on a wide range of student characteristics, monitor discussions, and relate them to current curriculum content based on interest, gender, language proficiency, for example.